The top 10 adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. Hello everybody, I'm Jordan, the PH is silent, and D&D has been around for almost 50 years. And there have been many adventures written for Dungeons & Dragons in that time, but it leads us to answer the question, what is the greatest adventure in Dungeons & Dragons? So for this video, I'm digging into an old Dungeon Magazine article that during the 30th anniversary, Dungeons & Dragons highlighted the 30 greatest adventures, and I hope in 2024, for the 50th anniversary, we can come up with a list of the 50 greatest adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. If you are curious, you can click down below or on the screen to be taken to 30 to 21 and another video that is 20 to 11. But in this video, we're going to talk about the top 10 adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. I want to remind you that a lot of these adventures are in here because they pushed the boundaries of adventure design over the years and really inspired a lot of new people, because this was kind of like an uncharted art for a long time. There will be timestamps and links to the adventures down below in the description. Let's get started. Number 10 is Return to the Tomb of Horrors, published in 1998. So the Tomb of Horrors stands out as a classic, but this was an extrapolation on that by Bruce Cordell that took the idea of the vicious lich's tomb, the unbeatable module, and gave it a cool backstory, gave it meaning, gave it amazing flavor. And so this became more than just a module, as a large portion of this module takes place in a demiplane called Moyle. And that demiplane is ruled by Orcus, and reading through this was probably the inspiration for the Shadowfell later on in 4th edition. So Moyle was created by Orcus as he pushed part of a demiplane into the plane of negative energy and the plane of shadow and kind of created this world. So you might remember the spell Shadow of Moyle, and that came from this module in a way. It was creative, creepy, and deadly, and it's a fitting tribute to the Tomb of Horrors. Number 9 is White Plume Mountain, released in 1979. Good old White Plume Mountain. I love this adventure, and really to me, it's the hallmark of Funhouse Dungeons. There's weird kayaking bad guys that are floating in the air. There's frictionless surfaces, and a battle with a giant crab. This adventure gave us 3 very iconic artifacts, which are Wave, Whelm, and Black Razor. And this adventure can also be found in Tales of the Yawning Portal for 5e. So I ran this and I had so much fun. And if you look at some really early videos on this channel, I have some campaign diaries where I talked about running through White Plume Mountain. So much fun. I really, really enjoy this. It's just a gonzo kind of crazy funhouse dungeon. One of the coolest rooms in this dungeon is the Inverted Ziggurat, which has each tier is infested with a different type of monster. And there's like manticores, giant scorpions. It's just great. Number 8, Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil from 2001. This 3rd edition adventure brings players back to the classic and well-known Temple of Elemental Evil. Alongside it, it also incorporated a lot of thematic elements of the Temple of Tharizdun, and it was written by Monty Cook. And it was a pretty harsh dungeon crawl with the return of the cult of elemental evil. And although I think this would stand alone, part of the fun is exploring the new areas if players are familiar with the original Temple of Elemental Evil. So if you had ran that back in the day and now you're revisiting it, but there's extra stuff added, I think that was a large part of the appeal. But Monty Cook just writes really good adventures, so it's probably great. Number 7, The Keep on the Borderlands from 1979. This is an early adventure written by Gary Gygax that was for BX&D back in the 70s. It was set in Greyhawk, but adapted for Mystara as well. It was adapted for the D&D Online video game, and since then it's had a lot of sequels and republications. Although a classic, I don't really see how this adventure redefined anything, or maybe it's just a nostalgia thing because it's a Gygax adventure from 1979. However, I would be curious to run this because it is on this list so high, and it would be interesting to run it using like Old School Essentials or BX&D, kind of just to see what all the fuss is about. Regardless, the Caves of Chaos, which is prominent in the adventure, became a very popular location in D&D lore. Number 6, The Desert of Desolation, 1987. This was the Egyptian-themed D&D adventure, and I love a good desert adventure for Dungeons & Dragons. Sunken cities, tombs of ancient pharaohs, a temple of Set. This was a pretty big module with some really great desert travel built in. There were random encounter tables, but also for like not just monsters, but like sinkholes and buried architecture and like the just weird hints at a larger world. And the dungeon part of it, the pyramid itself, was really popular because it had this reverse gravity room that potentially could surprise players as their characters plummeted directly into the ceiling. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the top 5 D&D adventures of all time. Number 5, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, 1980. This was a really amazing adventure for its time. It still is. It's really cool. So spoilers ahead. If you get a chance to run or play this one, I really would recommend it. It has been re-released for 5e through Goodman Games through the Reincarnated line, so you can get the 2e and the 5e adventure together. The adventure begins as an ordinary fantasy adventure, but then it takes a hard sci-fi turn. So you discover a weird metal cave in the mountains, and as you go in, you realize your characters don't really know what it is, but the players soon realize that you're in a buried spaceship. And there's robots and androids, and they're going to attack you. And there's weird alien creatures and alien weapons. And it came with this really fun book of art that was it was bundled together, but it was like a whole separate book of art that really defined what you were looking at, so you could show it to the players. It was unexpected. So a lot of the modules up until this point were really just European medieval fantasy based. Give me a chimera, maybe a hydra or something. But this was mixing peanut butter and chocolate, and it was a big surprise for people at the table. Especially fun, memorable moment is the indoor alien garden, where there are a lot of man-eating plants and various animals waiting to devour unassuming adventurers. Number 4 is the Temple of Elemental Evil from 1985. And holy cow, this is a big adventure. So in 1979, a small adventure called The Village of Hamlet turned into an enormous 5-level dungeon with 200 encounters. The Cult of Elemental Evil's primary residence, this was a very defended place, the Temple of Elemental Evil. And there are the 4 factions of the Cult of Elemental Evil that are trying to control the temple, one for each of the elements. It's just been very popular. So it's been revisited so many times due to the popularity. The 5e version was called Princes of the Apocalypse. But not only that, Goodman Games did a reincarnated version of this, so you can get a 5e version of the original temple and also play Princes of the Apocalypse if you want. I picked up this from Goodman Games as a collector because I just thought it would be fun to have like this piece of D&D history. But after thumbing through it, I would be really interested in running it. But I have heard the size of the adventure in the temple is really a turnoff, and few people actually finish the Temple of Elemental Evil, but a lot of people start it. From a collector standpoint, it's really fun to own, and maybe taking a couple 6-hour runs into the temple now and then would be fun. So you can pick up the 5e remake from Goodman Games or one of the many remakes that they've done for various editions. Number 3, I knew you knew it was on this list. You probably just didn't know where. This is the Tomb of Horrors for 1978. I've talked about Tomb of Horrors before on this channel as a whole, and I'm a big fan of it. And I know that's not everybody's take. So the Tomb of Horrors was the deadliest, most impossible, unfair dungeon ever made, and it was designed to be annoying and frustrating to players who thought that their character could survive anything. And it does this by breaking a lot of unspoken rules of D&D at the time. So, like, there were situations in the Tomb of Horrors where as you're exploring, you're punished for exploring, and you do things like you lose all of your magic items. There's no save for it, you just have lost them all. Or insta-dead, and it's like, what, I don't get to jump out of the way? No, sorry, you're just dead. There are other people on the D&D YouTube sphere that talk about how terrible of an adventure this is, and that it just really sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it does kind of suck for players. Why would anybody really want to go inside? And the thing is that they don't really. This became iconic because it forced the players to think as people rather than what their character would do. And so it's the Kobayashi Maru. It's just how far can I get through the tomb before dying? I ran this for 5e because it is in Tales of the Yawning Portal. I will tell you that the 5e version is a lot more survivable than other versions that I have played through. I think the Tomb of Horrors is a good convention module where you get to pick up random characters and you kind of see how far you can get. I personally understand the feeling. I would be very upset if my dungeon master just like surprised this on me and I lost all of my magic items or my character died and all this stuff, kind of like because of a bad decision, as opposed to an epic moment of oh, I saved the day, but at what cost? So I do get it, but as far as like pop culture references and stuff, it's just so iconic that I think everyone should try to play through it at least once. And you might really like it, and you might want to. You might be playing it and say, "This is really cool. I want to explore it some more and run it for some other people." Like I said, the 5e version of Tales of the Yawning Portal has the Tomb of Horrors in it, but I will say that the 5e version is a little more survivable than the original was. But still, I super recommend it. I think you should try it at least once. The Tomb of Horrors was really cool. I mean, it's so iconic. Number 2, Ravenloft from 1983. The module that sparked an entire campaign sitting. It was written by Tracy and Laura Hickman. Ravenloft defined how people wanted to play D&D. So a lot of people like goofy D&D, some wants dragons, all this stuff, but some people really wanted dark, spooky vampires. And the idea of a fortune card pull that would set up the placement of the treasure and the villain's goals was really unique and made the adventure very replayable. A haunted realm, it was a fun mixture of tone, story, and dungeon crawl that really made Ravenloft stand out. It's kind of interesting to think about this, but the original adventure is only 32 pages, but it spawned an entire second edition campaign setting along with countless extras and 2 books for 5th edition. It has amazing maps, a very memorable antagonist, and super interesting and kind of fleshed out NPCs. So if you want to play this for 5th edition, you can pick up Curse of Strahd, which is the 5e version of the original Ravenloft module, with a lot more stuff added, because there's a lot more to Ravenloft now. Or you can play the original with your favorite retro clone. I think it would be a lot of fun. Like old school Essentials Ravenloft, super cool. And now, the number 1 adventure of all time, according to some dungeon designers from 2004. Number 1, The Queen of Spiders, 1986. So the Drow have become very popular villains and anti-heroes in Dungeons & Dragons. And this adventure pulled some of the most popular modules together to form this narrative involving the Drow. Nothing really had been done like this before. I was surprised by this because Queen of Spiders is not something that you hear a lot about. Unlike Ravenloft, Tomb of Horrors, Temple of Elemental Evil, I was like, Queen of Spiders, number 1? But when you start looking at it, it really changed Dungeons & Dragons a lot, and design and storytelling. So when this came out, nothing had really been done like this before. The Drow were just considered these weird monsters. And now, through this module, we have this entire huge underground city. And it was shocking. There was just so much room for the writers to explore of like Drow society and noble houses and male and female infighting and intrigue and thievery and poison. This really set the skeletal framework for other authors to be able to explore the Drow in other settings like the Forgotten Realms and stuff like that. Although Queen of the Spiders, I believe, is set in Greyhawk, I think a lot of the framework that was set here was used later on for Wizards of the Coast most famous Drow and his Panther companion for the Forgotten Realms. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, this is probably the start of like that character and a lot of stuff. As I said, this was a lot of modules kind of put together and then stringed together with a narrative. The adventure, the adventure ends with the module Queen of the Demon Web Pits, where players who were in the previous module, Vault of the Drow, traveled to the abyssal lair of Lolth herself, the Demon Queen of Spiders and patroness of the party's Drow enemies, The material plane is being absorbed into the abyss due to Lolth, and the adventurers end up with a fight against Lolth herself. The art can look a little silly compared to today's standards, but it was really an intense module and fight. I mean, this is the basis for things like the Underdark, Drow Society. Lolth got heavily defined. A lot of ideas and thoughts about Drow and Drow culture and stuff that made appearances later on in countless number of other adventures. This is the point where the Drow became more than just the evil elf that I get to fight. And it also defined the Abyss. So for 1986, we didn't have Planescape. We didn't have a lot of information on the Abyss yet. And this was, really kind of like, what are the Demon Web pits? How do they work? What's going on there? So lots of cool stuff with this. But what do you think? Is the Queen of Spiders your number one pick for the greatest Dungeons & Dragons adventure of all time? What 5e adventures or 4e adventures do you think you would want to throw into this? I know that with all the adventures written since 2004, I really think we could come up and add to this list and get the 50 top adventures of Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, off the top of my head, Keep on the Shadowfell should probably be on there. It would be amazing to say that you've run even half of these adventures. I know that I've run like hardly any of them, and nobody really runs adventures anymore. I think the large majority of people run a homebrew. So I don't know. I love adventures though. I think they're it gives me a really awesome history about Dungeons and Dragons. And I know a lot of these older adventures, Queen of Spiders included, they don't really hold up to today's ideas about role play and tabletop role-playing games. But sometimes you just want to go see what's in a cave. Many of you probably don't enjoy dungeon crawlers, and that's okay. I like that D&D can be different things for different people. But when you look at a list like this, I hope you can see the importance of past modules and how they have influenced today's Dungeons & Dragons. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Subscribe and send this video to your Dungeon Masters so they will run Tomb of Horrors for you. And I will see you all in the next video.